Hi, we're Frank and Angie. We're fire earlier or better at home or abroad, whichever suits you best. Today we're going to talk about what's going on. Should you be worried about what's in the news right now, the so-called coronavirus? We're here in Eastern Europe, and one of the locals that doesn't speak any English whatsoever, and we don't speak any of the local language either. I mean, I know how to say thank you and no. And she came over and said something about coronavirus, and then she said something about watching TV. That's a clue. Now, stay with me on this because we're going to cover this. Here's the headlines. A new unidentified virus is causing pneumonia outbreak. Pneumonia outbreak is what they were calling it about a month ago. You know, this is interesting, but before we get into that, I ran into these couple of locals in China, in specifically where this seems to have originated in Wuhan, China. There's a female vlogger in Wuhan. She's a local Wuhan resident reporting in on what it's really like there and what's going on. And of course, the people are being very careful. You know, she describes how people are being very careful about not going around other people, and in an effort to avoid contagion of this pulmonary infection that's just hitting people's lungs. And so as I watched the interview, or a couple of the things that stood out in the video was that she said that the news is blowing this out of proportion. Yes, there are sick people, and yes, people are dying. We're going to cover that area in this discussion. Her opinion is that it's getting blown out of proportion, getting into hysteria. Before you overreact to that, let me go to the next person that is also in China, that was also a person here on a video that says that he is reporting straight from Wuhan, and he said that what he's seeing that inside the hospitals that he visited, he's actually a internet reporter in China, he's Chinese, that in the hospitals he visited in Wuhan, that 70%, which is, a large majority, of the coronavirus patients were on oxygen. So, and he's reporting of shortages of testing kits and masks. But this clue that they're on oxygen, it is a clue. They're on oxygen, so they need oxygen, so they have breathing problems. This is pulmonary, okay? So I started this conversation with the vocabulary that was being used in the beginning of when this was started to be reported, and the terminology that was used was pneumonia infections. Now, pneumonia infections are not new, but listen to this. The hysteria of the moment is what I want to show you. The headline, a new unidentified virus causing pneumonia outbreaks. I want you to stay focused on that terminology that's a month old. Okay, another headline says Japanese with severe pneumonia hospitalized in Wuhan. And that was more recent. Now, this kind of a headline, it makes it sound like, the Japanese, they were there in the location and they were hospitalized. Now, I'm not saying this thing doesn't spread, but with any contagious or infectious diseases, there's always the potential and the possibility, of spreading. And so one of the things that you want to do is, stay away from sick people. That's just a given. But again, this is a big minefield and a hornet's nest. Let me show you why. So here comes some of the hysteria that I noticed in this space. Uber suspends scores of Mexico accounts to curb virus spread. Now, the ride-hailing company said Saturday suspended 240 accounts of users in Mexico who may recently had come into contact with someone possibly infected with the new coronaviruses. But get this, there is no confirmed cases in Mexico, and all 9 suspected cases were later declared negative. So, this is just part of the hysteria. I remind you that there's been many of these hysterias. I'm not minimizing at all the fact that people are getting sick and people are dying. But as you will see when I show you in a moment, why I'm saying what I'm saying is to separate the facts from the hysteria part. So there's 2 sections here. All right, so there's been a variety of scares throughout the last decade that I can remember. But here, according to the Washington Post, the flu there were record-breaking levels of illness and hospitalization rates. The flu killed 180 children last season, but this was 2018, and only 2009 swine flu, they like to give them names, which killed 358 children, was worse in the 14 years since health authorities began tracking. Now, as you'll see, it's really interesting that a lot of times what happens is that the deaths are involving usually those that are weaker immunes, such as very young children and very old folks that are already quite ill. There was a flu pandemic in 1918 that was also killing people within the 20 to 40 year olds. The thing that stands out to me about that and all of this really is that pandemic was during World War I. Interestingly enough, it was not during the World War II. It was just World War I. And what was different about World War I? Well, the time period back then was such that the armies in the war used a lot of infantry. There's just all these thousands of people that are camped all in the same areas. Conditions are not ideal, they're not hygienic. This one room idea is something that our societies and a lot of societies have not really come away from all that well, and we're still using antiquated methods where we're just putting people all together in the same area, and this all it does is just makes it easier to transmit, bacteria, germs, viruses, what have you. And you have situations like years ago, before we ever started homeschooling, longtime followers know we homeschooled all three of our boys. And before we started all that, we were still in our 20s. We were not very strong in our knowledge on health. We knew enough to stay healthy, but not well enough to stay away from sickness all the time at that time. And we noticed something. We noticed that whenever we did get sick, it was always because most of the time it was from our children, our young children, because remember, they're going to school and then they're in the same room, and when you've got 30 kids or hundreds of kids in the whole school, that they're all in the same space, and all it takes is one of them to be really sick with the flu, and then everybody else gets it. And then these kids go home and give it to the parents and their brothers and sisters. And so this is how things spread. Okay, so spreading and contagiousness is an issue with these things. So I'm telling you all this because there is some truth in it. There's always some fact and some truth in things that are blown out of proportion. Okay, but there's this section of it, the part of it that is just hysterical. And, and I'm hoping to show you that in this video. We always seem to get sick after one of our boys would come home sick from school, and then we would end up catching something. Then we started homeschooling, and that stopped. But as we improved our knowledge about strengthening your immune system and to be able to withstand, bacteria, viruses, and what's in the atmosphere every day of our lives anyway, and when we just come in contact with people, I started noticing as we started focusing on building up our immune system that I was able to be around sick people and not get sick. And this got better and better through the years. That's just personal experience. But let me tell you what some of the facts in this space are saying. Okay? Facts. There are millions of different types of viruses, although only about 5,000 types have been described in detail. As of recently, the NCBI Virus Genome Database has more than 75,000 complete genome sequences, but there are doubtlessly many, many more to be discovered. So there's always viruses that have not been discovered. So it isn't that the virus itself isn't new. Sure, you can say, oh, it's a new virus, but there are so many thousands and thousands, maybe millions of viruses that there's always going to be a new virus. So what's not new about this is that the immune system is designed to fight off these attempted intrusions from bacteria and viruses and this kind of thing. And societies and cultures in general are making advances in understanding these things. But this kind of hysterical reporting doesn't help us. We don't move forward with this. So on the one hand, segregation is a good thing. The people in Wuhan are doing that. But this Uber thing is super hysterical in my opinion. So what is it about people and their immune systems, and why are they getting sick, and why all of a sudden are so many people, and why do these pandemics happen? I've touched a little bit about the army men in World War I. The other thing that it says here in this report, in a nutshell, that there are antibiotics that they were using as far as the healthcare systems to help people. But they're saying that even so, that there are other bacterial, and this is the antibiotic version of getting rid of these things, is that there are always other types of bacterial. And this is why they say things like a new virus. What that really means is new to our knowledge of antibiotics. In other words, based on the kind of weapons we have, we don't have a weapon for this one. So, and to try to have a weapon for every single million types of viruses is a little bit self-defeating, in my opinion. Better to fortify your fortress so that your enemy can't come in, right? There are bacterial pneumonias caused by other bacterial pathogens. So this all starts with bacterial pathogens. And as we know, there are many, many, many bacterial pathogens. And as I've said many, many times in the past about shopping at some of these developing world mercados, which the Rams are just, they're the most unhygienic places you've ever been to. So we're talking about when this got started. Apparently, the sources say that it was an elderly man that liked to go to the Chinese mercado quite frequently. The health authorities reported the first death from this disease, which they like to call new, but isn't new. The patient was a 61-year-old man who frequently visited the live market in Wuhan, is it Wuhan, that most cases have been linked to. But get this, he also suffered from abdominal tumors already and chronic liver disease. Weak immune, anyone? This is where I'm going with this, weak immune. So, what causes weak immune? Well, obviously sickness causes weak immune. But let me tell you just briefly here, the Numbeo has a pollution index. Isn't that neat? Numbeo pollution index in Wuhan, China, air pollution data from World Health Organization. Very high pollution levels. Pollution in Wuhan, China, air pollution, very high, 85.2. Drinking water pollution and inaccessibility, high. Dissatisfaction with garbage disposal, high. Dirty and untidy, high. Water pollution, high. Dissatisfaction for people to spend time in the city, high. This is not a clean place. All right, so according to the sources that I just quoted earlier, that there are many types of bacterial pathogens that will and can cause pneumonia. It follows that what happens is that our immune system isn't fighting these off, and then these attackers go to our weakest parts, which in this case seems to be, according to the initial report that I mentioned about the local Chinese reporting from Wuhan straight to what they observed in the hospital, that 70% of those there were on respiratory. It looks like respiratory is a big, big issue there. And as we just saw in the Numbeo report, the air pollution is extremely high. I already knew this without going to Numbeo because I did some research on central China. I found out how polluted this place is. According to ScienceDaily.com, the many different causes leading to defects of the immune system or weakness in the immune system, describes from a professor from the Clinic of Immunology and Rheumatology at Hanover Medical School. The most common causes worldwide include malnutrition and poor sanitary conditions. That's a clue that's really important, malnutrition and poor sanitary condition. What is the meaning of a sanitary condition? The dictionary says sanitary condition, the state of sanitation, i.e. clean or dirty. So there you have it. That's what causes low immune, weak immune, immune disorders. That's one of the things that causes it. One of the things. And here we have extremely high and high conditions of extreme unsanitary living conditions or infrastructure in this area of China. And so is it any wonder, let me show you also here a report that the citizens of Wuhan just a few years ago were protesting in the streets at the high level of pollution, and nothing nothing has changed. Eventually, when the level of pollution is so high, your body can only take so much, and it just breaks down, and it becomes weak, and it is no longer able to fight things off, and you become ill. And if it's really bad, you die. So I hope I've shed some light on this for you. It brings to mind when my boys were younger, and they were talking to their friends, and their friends were telling them, because we don't partake with this kind of hysteria in our household. Remember the Y2K thing, when the world was going to end in the year 2000? That was one. And then remember my son comes to me one year when they were younger and says, "Dad, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? There's a rice shortage." I mean, they were on TV in our area, rice shortage, in Asia. And I said, I didn't answer him. I said, "Come with me. Let's get in the car." We went to the store, and I showed him the shelf was full of rice. There was no rice shortage scare. There was no issues at all, and there never was. But on television, they were talking about rice shortage. Anyhow, that's my personal input on this thing. And, I just don't want you to worry about things to such an extent that you participate in hysteria. On the other hand, I don't want you to be careless and not understand that a contagious situation requires that we remove ourselves from being around people that may be spreading these kinds of really strong diseases. So, but the thing is that in our travels, okay, some of these cities like Cuenca, Ecuador, and even in a lot of other areas, our personal experience in Cuenca, Ecuador, there's an awful lot of old buildings in some of these countries are really, really old, a lot older than we're used to. And then, even though the United States is also old, there's a lot of new construction going on. But in a lot of these places, they're still developing. They don't have that. So they still have antiquated construction, which means poor breathing ability. A lot of the buildings don't breathe. They don't, but anyway, long story short, there's an awful lot of mold going on in a lot of these places, not just Cuenca. I'm not picking on Cuenca. We're over here in Eastern Europe right now. We're seeing the same thing, really old sections of the city, very small new construction areas. The majority of people are in old sections. The buildings are antiquated. There's tremendous amounts of mold, and it's winter. We see people coughing and they're just sick all over the place. So I'm saying that we've never really been able to get away from sick people unless we stay home and don't go anywhere, which is what the people in Wuhan are doing because it's so bad there. But see, the conditions there are so bad that they're running the risk that their immune has been compromised and is getting compromised on a daily basis. So that's the big question I want you to focus on. Are you taking care of your immune today? I've showed you how I do that when I travel in other videos, and I won't go into that in this video. That's not what it's about. I wanted you to watch our video and assess your personal situation and understand how you should be reacting, what would make the most sense for you. And depending on your situation, if you have a weak immune, if you do live in a polluted area, you should take extreme care to segregate yourself from sick people. But if you're not in such conditions, if you're in a healthy area, you've got clean air, you've got clean water, you're healthy, you take care of your health. And if you don't yet, I urge you to start taking care of your health today. We do have some books we've written on that. And thanks for watching the video. If you like the video, please thumbs it up. Please subscribe and make some comments. Let us know what you thought of the video. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming to our channel.